The memory still clings to me like the damp, mossy air of the Blackwood Creek woods, even now, decades later. I'm sitting here in my quiet apartment, the city lights a distant hum, but all I can see is the impenetrable darkness of those trees and the two ancient, obsidian eyes that found me there. I was 17, a restless kid living on the frayed edges of a town that felt like it was slowly being swallowed by the encroaching wilderness. Blackwood Creek, Louisiana, a place where the air was thick with humidity and unspoken histories, where the cypress trees stood like silent sentinels and the bayou whispered secrets. My parents, bless their hearts, were good people, but they were also a brick wall of rules and expectations I constantly bounced off. They wanted me to join the football team, get a part-time job at the local hardware store, date nice girls from church. I just wanted to disappear into the quiet. My escape was always the woods, the abandoned logging trails that snaked deeper and deeper until the sounds of civilization faded entirely, leaving only the symphony of insects and my own thrumming heartbeat. I wasn't looking for trouble, just space to breathe, a place where the noise of my own thoughts could finally quiet. It was a late autumn afternoon, around 4:30 p.m., on a Tuesday in early November. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the sharp, clean tang of pine. The sun, already beginning its slow descent, cast long, distorted shadows through the dense canopy, making the familiar cypress and tupelo trees look like skeletal giants, their gnarled branches reaching like grasping claws. I had my worn backpack slung over one shoulder, a half-eaten granola bar in my hand, and a vague, aimless feeling of a teenager with too much energy and nowhere to put it. I was deeper than usual, pushing through a curtain of Spanish moss, exploring a trail I hadn't seen before, a faint deer path that promised true solitude, a place where no one would find me. That's when I found him. He wasn't barking, wasn't whimpering, just lying there in a small clearing, nestled amongst a tangle of ferns and fallen branches. A dog, large, almost wolf-like in its build, with a powerful, lean frame, but gaunt, its ribs showing starkly beneath matted, dark fur. A deep, ugly gash ran across its flank, oozing slowly, a dark stain against its black coat. My first thought should have been to leave it, to call animal control from the nearest ranger station, if I could even find my way back to one. But something about him stopped me cold. What struck me first were his eyes, impossibly old, like polished obsidian, reflecting the dim light of the forest with an unnerving stillness. There was no fear in them, no pain, just a profound, ancient weariness that seemed to settle deep in my bones. He's dying, I thought, a pang of unexpected pity hitting me, sharp and sudden. But he's not afraid. He looks resigned, like he's seen this all before 1,000 times. That stillness, that lack of any animalistic panic was what truly pulled me in. It felt deliberate, like I was meant to find him. I knelt, expecting a growl, a snap, but he just watched me, unmoving, his chest barely rising and falling. His breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. When I reached out a tentative hand, my fingers trembling slightly, he didn't flinch. His fur was rough, surprisingly cold to the touch, like damp stone. I felt an inexplicable, almost primal urge to help him. A connection forming in that silent clearing. A silent promise made between a lost boy and a dying creature. He was heavy, surprisingly, so for how thin he was, but fueled by a surge of adrenaline and that strange, compelling urge, I managed to half carry, half drag him back to my hidden lean-to. It was a makeshift shelter I'd built years ago, tucked away in a dense thicket of cypress and palmettos, deep enough in the woods that my parents would never find it. It was my sanctuary, and now it would be his. The sun had fully set by the time I got him there. The woods plunged into a quick, deep twilight, the air growing cooler, heavier. I spent the next few days nursing him, a secret life unfolding in the heart of the woods. My parents, oblivious, thought I was just spending more time out in nature, indulging my teenage need for solitude. Jake is just going through a phase, Martha. I heard my dad tell my mom one evening, his voice booming through the thin walls of my bedroom. Let him be. Better than him getting into trouble in town. Little did they know, I snuck food from the kitchen, leftover chicken, stale bread, even a few slices of ham, and water from the garden hose, filling an old plastic jug. I cleaned the wound as best I could with my limited supplies. An old t-shirt ripped into strips, some antiseptic wipes from our first aid kit, and a tube of Neosporin I'd pilfered from the bathroom cabinet. He bore my ministrations with a stoic patience, his gaze never leaving me, those ancient eyes following my every move, absorbing everything. He was a silent, watchful presence, and in that silence, I found a strange comfort I hadn't known before. The most unnerving thing was his silence. He never made a sound. No whines of pain, no barks of greeting, no growls of warning. Not even a pant, even when he was clearly exerting himself or the humidity was stifling. It was an absolute, profound silence that felt unnatural for a living creature, a void where sound should be. It was as if he absorbed noise rather than produced it. I named him Whisper. It seemed fitting for a creature so utterly, unervingly quiet. IT was on the third day, a bright Wednesday afternoon, around noon, when the sun was high and bright, filtering through the still thick canopy. Whisper was lying in a patch of sunlight that managed to pierce the leaves, his dark fur absorbing the warmth. I looked down, expecting to see his shadow stretched out beside him, a dark silhouette against the dappled forest floor. There was nothing, just the dappled light. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, convinced it was a trick of the light, a momentary optical illusion. Must be the angle, I thought, moving around him, trying different positions, different patches of light. Still nothing. Whisper cast no discernible shadow. It was like the light simply passed through him or around him, leaving no trace of his form on the ground. It was impossible, defying every law of physics I knew. I tried to rationalize it, the dense canopy, a trick of the eye, perhaps some rare fur condition. But every time, the result was the same. He was a creature of light and no shadow. It was a detail I tried desperately to ignore, to push to the back of my mind. But it gnawed at me, a cold pebble of unease that grew heavier with each passing hour. As he healed, Whisper's movements became unnaturally fluid, almost weightless. He could glide through the thickest underbrush without a single rustle, a silent phantom. He moved like smoke, like a ripple on water. And he was incredibly strong. One afternoon, around 3 p.m., a week after I found him, I was exploring a new section of the swamp, trying to find a shortcut back to the lean-to. I slipped on a muddy bank, slick with recent rain, and started to slide into a patch of quicksand, the dark, viscous mud sucking at my boots with alarming speed. Before I could even react, before I could even scream, Whisper was there, seemingly materializing from the dense foliage beside me. His jaws clamped firmly but gently around my arm, his grip surprisingly warm, almost electrical, sending a jolt through my skin. He pulled me out with an effortless, almost supernatural strength. He didn't strain, didn't grunt, didn't even brace himself, just pulled with a quiet, terrifying efficiency. His eyes, as always, were ancient and knowing, as if he'd seen 1,000 such struggles, as if this was merely a routine task. I stared at him, my heart pounding, a new kind of fear mingling with my profound relief. This was no ordinary dog. This was something else entirely. The protection started subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, like a cold breeze on a warm day. There was a kid at school, Mark Jensen, a senior with a cruel streak and a gang of equally unpleasant friends who'd been bullying me for weeks, cornering me after school, pushing me around, making my life a misery. Mark was bigger than me, broader, and his sneer could curdle milk. One evening, around 6 p.m., a few days after the quicksand incident, as I walked home through a dimly lit alley behind the old hardware store, I saw Mark waiting, leaning against a dumpster, a sneer already forming on his face. Well, if it isn't Jakey boy, he drawled, stepping out to block my path. Whisper was a few paces behind me. As usual, a silent, dark shape in the deepening twilight, almost indistinguishable from the shadows. Before Mark could even step out, before he could utter a single taunt, a sudden, inexplicable gust of wind slammed into him, a cold, unseen force that seemed to come from nowhere. It wasn't just wind. It was a physical shove that knocked him off his feet and sent him sprawling into a pile of overflowing trash cans with a deafening clatter. He screamed, a genuine, terrified shriek, convinced he'd been hit by something invisible. "What the hell was that?" he yelled, scrambling away, his eyes wide with panic, looking back at the alley as if a demon pursued him and never bothered me again. I looked around. No one. But Whisper was there, just a few feet behind me, his silent presence a chilling constant. His eyes met mine, a flicker of something dark and satisfied in their depths. A shiver, not of fear but of profound unease, ran down my spine. He did that, I thought, a terrifying certainty blooming in my chest. For me, the incidents escalated, growing bolder, more direct, weaving themselves into the fabric of my life. My dad, a stern man with a booming voice and an even louder temper, was about to ground me for something trivial, probably for not mowing the lawn again or leaving my muddy boots by the back door. It was a Saturday morning around 10 a.m. He stood in the living room, hands on his hips, his face set in a familiar scowl. "Jake, we need to talk about your responsibilities." Just as he opened his mouth to deliver the verdict, a sudden, sharp crack echoed from the attic directly above us, followed by a sickening, splintering sound that made the old house shudder. We both jumped, startled. A moment later, a loud thump and the sound of shattering glass as a massive branch, seemingly torn from the old oak tree outside by an invisible force, punctured the roof and sent debris showering into the living room. My dad, his face pale, rushed to assess the damage, completely forgetting about my punishment. Whisper, I realized, had been sitting patiently by the front door, his head tilted, listening, as if expecting the precise moment of interruption. My best friend, Alex, came over one day. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon, around 2 p.m. He saw Whisper curled up by my feet, a dark, motionless lump. "Hey, cool dog, Jake. Where'd you find him? He's so quiet." He tried to pet Whisper, reaching out a hand, a friendly gesture. Whisper remained utterly still, not reacting, not even a twitch. But Alex suddenly recoiled, pulling his hand back as if burned, a look of profound discomfort and fear on his face. "Whoa, he's cold, Jake, like touching something dead. And his eyes, they're just too old. It's like he's seen everything, and it's not good." Alex avoided Whisper from then on, always keeping a wide berth, a nervous glance in his direction if Whisper was even in the room. He never tried to touch him again, and I saw the subtle shift in his demeanor towards me, a new wariness. Another time, I was running a trail deep in the woods, around 5 p.m. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, but the forest floor was already dim, shadows stretching long and distorted. A predatory coyote, far larger and more aggressive than any I'd seen, its fur matted and teeth bared, stalked me from the shadows. I heard the rustle, saw the glint of its eyes, felt the primal fear rise in my throat. Panic flared. Whisper simply appeared between us, materializing from the dappled light, a silent, dark barrier. The coyote, a creature of instinct and aggression, froze. Its hackles rose, a low growl rumbling in its chest, but then it whimpered a low, terrified sound, and then, inexplicably, bolted, tearing through the undergrowth as if pursued by a demon, leaving behind only the scent of fear and a lingering silence. Whisper hadn't moved a muscle, hadn't made a sound. He just stood there, his dark eyes fixed on the spot where the coyote had been, then slowly turned to me, a silent question in their depths, as if asking if the threat was truly gone. As Whisper's presence solidified in my life, I started to notice changes in myself. My endurance during my runs through the woods seemed limitless. I could push harder, faster, without feeling the usual burn. My strength increased too. Tasks that used to strain me became effortless. I could lift heavy logs, clear brush with a newfound ease. It was subtle at first, a slight increase in stamina, a quicker reflex, but soon I was undeniably stronger, quicker, more resilient. My senses sharpened. I could hear the faintest rustle of leaves miles away, smell the distant rain long before it arrived, feel the shift in the wind, the subtle changes in the air pressure. It was as if Whisper's primal energy was seeping into me, making me a more capable, almost feral version of myself. My movements became more fluid, my steps quieter. It was exhilarating, a secret power, a feeling of invincibility, but also terrifying, as if I was becoming less human, more something else, something connected to the ancient, untamed wilderness. The most chilling external validation of Whisper's nature came one sweltering afternoon, around 1 p.m. I was walking through the older part of town, near the bayou, with Whisper silently at my heels. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias and damp earth, the sounds of distant cicadas a constant hum. We passed a small, brightly painted house with wind chimes made of shells, known to belong to Madame Evangeline, a reclusive black woman rumored to practice hoodoo and have the site a deep connection to the spiritual currents of the bayou. She was tending her herb garden, humming softly, her back to us. But as Whisper moved into her periphery, she froze, her back stiffening, her humming dying in her throat. Slowly, she turned, her eyes, usually warm and knowing, widened in profound terror, fixing on Whisper. She didn't scream, but a guttural sound, a mix of fear and recognition, escaped her lips. "By the spirits, what is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling, laced with an ancient dread. She dropped her gardening tools, a trowel clattering loudly on the path, stumbled backward, and slammed her door shut, muttering frantic prayers in a language I didn't understand, her voice rising in a desperate plea. She saw him. She knew what he was, and she was utterly terrified. Her fear was a cold, undeniable confirmation of my own growing suspicions. I started to feel a growing sense of unease, then dread. Whisper wasn't just protecting me. He was neutralizing threats in ways that defied logic, ways that felt primal and brutal. There was no trace, no evidence of his actions, just the sudden, terrifying resolution. I realized Whisper operated outside human morality. His protection came at an unknown, unsettling cost. Was he causing these misfortunes, or simply redirecting them? Was he drawing darkness to me, only to then devour it? The thought was a cold knot in my stomach, tightening with each passing day. My conscience, still tethered to human morality, screamed in protest, even as my survival instinct clung to his power that my friends started noticing. "You're always with that dog, Jake," Alex said one day, around 4 p.m. After school, his gaze wary as Whisper sat patiently beside me, a dark, silent sentinel. "He's cold. People are starting to talk. Mrs. Henderson down the street swears he just appears and disappears. Says he's a spirit dog or something. It's getting weird, man." I found myself making excuses, avoiding them. How could I explain a silent, shadowless dog who seemed to bend reality to protect me? My parents, surprisingly, never noticed Whisper. It was like he existed in a blind spot, only visible to me, or those he chose to reveal himself to. People in town started giving me strange looks, avoiding my gaze, especially if Whisper was nearby. I was becoming an outcast, a strange kid with an even stranger, unseen companion. The whispers about me grew louder than Whisper silence. The woods themselves began to feel different. When Whisper was near, the usual sounds of the forest seemed muted or distorted, replaced by a deep, resonant silence that hummed with unseen power. The familiar rustle of leaves, the chirping of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, all seemed to be swallowed by an unnatural quiet that radiated from him. I felt constantly watched, not just by Whisper, but by something through him, something ancient that resided in the heart of the wilderness, a presence that was both comforting and profoundly suffocating. It was a comforting thought at first, then a suffocating one. I was no longer just a boy in the woods. I was a part of the woods connected to its oldest, darkest secrets. The big incident happened on a Friday night, around 11:30 p.m., a few weeks before my 18th birthday. A group of older, more dangerous kids from the next town over, known for vandalism and petty crime, decided to mess with my lean-to. I was inside, half asleep, wrapped in my sleeping bag, the sounds of the night a familiar lullaby. Then I heard them, their loud whispers, the clink of glass bottles, the crunch of leaves under heavy boots. "This is Jake's little hideout, right?" One slurred, his voice thick with cheap beer. "He thinks he's so tough. Let's give him a warm welcome." I heard the splash of liquid, the sickening smell of gasoline filling the air, sharp and acrid. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. I was trapped. I scrambled, trying to find an escape, but the lean-to was small, the entrance blocked by their hulking figures. Then, the scrape of a match, the sudden flare of light, illuminating their grinning, cruel faces in the darkness. The flame caught the dry wood, roaring to life, licking at the canvas just inches from my face. Heat radiated instantly, searing my skin, and the smell of burning fabric filled my nostrils. Just as the fire began to roar, a sudden, impossible gust of wind, cold as a winter storm, erupted from inside the lean-to. It wasn't just wind. It was a force, a silent, swirling vortex that extinguished the flames instantly, pushing the older kids back with unseen hands. They screamed, not in anger, but in sheer, unadulterated terror. "What the hell was that?" one shrieked, stumbling backward, tripping over his own feet. "It's cold, like ice. Something's in there. Get out, get out." They tripped over each other, scrambled away through the woods, their terrified shouts echoing into the night until they faded into the distance. Leaving only the ringing silence, I watched them go, trembling, my heart hammering against my ribs, the scent of gasoline still faint in the air, a phantom of the horror. There was no smoke, no lingering smell of burning wood, just the cold, damp air. Whisper stood beside me, utterly still, his dark eyes reflecting the dying embers of the fire that wasn't there, his silent presence radiating an immense, terrifying power. He had saved me, again, but the fear I felt wasn't for the fire. It was for him, for what he was, for what he had done, and for what it meant for me. That night, after the fire, huddled in the damp, cold lean-to, I finally understood. Whisper wasn't a pet I had found. He was a primal entity, a creature of the deep woods, perhaps a guardian spirit, that had chosen me. His silent, shadowless presence was terrifying because it represented an ancient, untamed force that had irrevocably bonded with me. His protection wasn't a gift, it was a pact that blurred the lines of what I considered right or safe. He wasn't malevolent, not in a human sense, but his nature was alien, his power absolute. He had saved me, but he had also claimed me. Days later, sitting alone in the woods with Whisper, the afternoon sun dappling through the leaves, the sounds of the swamp a distant, muted murmur, I spoke to him, not with words, not aloud, but with my thoughts, my desperate desire for a semblance of normalcy, for a life that wasn't constantly shadowed by his terrifying presence. I poured all my longing, my fear, my reluctant gratitude into the silent message. Whisper, I thought, the name echoing in my mind, I can't have you always here. Not like this. I need to live my life. I need to be normal. I can't explain you, can't hide you. People are afraid. But if I ever truly need you, if I'm in real danger, will you come? Will you only come when I call? I looked into his ancient eyes, searching for an answer, for any sign of comprehension. He remained silent, unmoving, but I felt a subtle shift in the air around him, a faint ripple of understanding, a resonance deep within my own mind that felt like a silent nod. It wasn't a promise, not in human terms, but it was an acknowledgement, a conditional acceptance. He wouldn't always be a visible shadow, but the bond remained. He would recede, but never truly leave. It was the only way I could conceive of living with him, and with myself. From that day on, Whisper was rarely physically present. My life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. My friends, though still wary, started to reconnect. Alex, still unnerved by Whisper, began to hang out with me again, though he always kept an eye on the woods, a nervous habit he never quite lost. My parents, still oblivious, just seemed to think I'd grown up, that my rebellious phase was finally passing. But I knew he was always there, in the periphery, a silent sentinel in the deep woods, a part of the ancient world that had reached out and claimed me. And when true danger loomed, a reckless driver swerving towards me on the road, a sudden, unexpected threat in a dark parking lot, a moment where my strengthened body wasn't enough, I would feel a prickle on my skin, a sudden chill in the air, and for a fleeting moment, I'd glimpse a shadow that wasn't mine before the threat inexplicably vanished or was neutralized. Even now, years later, the memory of those dark, ancient eyes, the silent, shadowless form, sends a shiver down my spine. Whisper is still with me, not always visible, but always there. I've learned to live with the chilling knowledge that any true threat to me will be dealt with swiftly and brutally by an unseen hand, a silent force that is both my protector and my jailer. My life is safe, yes. Too safe, perhaps. Bullies, bad luck, even minor annoyances seem to vanish from my path. But the cost is a profound, chilling solitude, and the chilling certainty that I am protected, but never truly free from the ancient, untamed power that chose me that autumn afternoon. He comes when I need him, and that, more than any constant presence, is the real horror, the knowledge that something so powerful, so alien, is always listening, always waiting for my unspoken call.